Welcome back to Anime Lockdown. I'm happy to introduce you to Kevin Derendorf with Ultraman in animation.
Hey there. I'm Kevin Derendorf. I run a blog called Mazer Patrol, and I have written a book called KAIJU for Hipsters. And I'm really happy to have the opportunity to come to Anime Lockdown today and talk about Ultraman. It's a special weekend for Ultraman. Yesterday was actually the 55th anniversary of the character's first appearance on Japanese television. So you might be kind of wondering, like, hey, I know about Ultraman. That's a live action thing. Why would that be showing up on an anime convention? That's not okay. And to that I say, well, there's a lot of connections between the two, and I try to go to live action tokusatsu special effects conventions and talk about anime, and go to conventions for anime and talk about tokusatsu, and kind of open down those barriers and kind of keep people from getting too siloed in this, because it's really interesting the way that these things overlap. So sometimes you'll be watching an anime and there'll be stuff that really looks like, hey, this is very explicitly inspired by Ultraman and similar programs. And then other times you'll be watching something that's completely not inspired by Ultraman, but there'll be just a little nugget here or there that pops up, and you'll see, oh, there's some reference here, and I don't quite know what this is, but I'll just kind of roll with it. Or sometimes you'll be watching a program that is entirely inspired by Ultraman and not recognize it, just because of the way that a lot of times fans get into these groups and they don't really know about what sources have inspired different things. And that's why I thought this would be a good chance to talk about the whole oeuvre. So today we're going to kind of cover a bunch of topics. I'm going to try to go super fast because I overestimated the amount of content I could cover in a short amount of time. But we're going to go through a bunch of Ultraman references in anime. We're going to talk about the history of the Ultraman franchise overall, and then talk about some of the overlap between the creators who work in both this franchise and the anime industry. And believe it or not, there's multiple anime incarnations of the character. So here I've got a little bit of a guessing game I usually play with crowds at conventions. But it can be a little bit tricky over Twitch. There's a little bit of a time delay. So I'm going to talk to things kind of quickly and type out your answers in the chat. And there might be a little bit of a delay. And if you get one right, feel that you have managed to succeed. So just to start things off, in a lot of anime, particularly mecha shows and monster shows, you'll get these effects in the opening credits where you'll have a dark silhouette and a sort of nebulous, murky background behind them. And this is because in the original 60s Ultraman shows, the monsters and heroes and mecha were all portrayed in these sort of silhouettes. Now here's another, speaking of silhouettes, a shot that you'll see in a whole bunch of different series. And it's usually towards the end of a show, you'll have two characters, usually some sort of romantic couple, and they're going to have a dramatic confession between the two of them, and suddenly they turn into silhouettes and there's a sparkly background. This is something that you might not know what this is from if you haven't really looked into it, but you'll see it come up again and again and again. So what could that be from? Well, you guessed it, it's from Ultraman, and specifically the ending of ULTRASEVEN, when the main character confesses that he is in fact an alien and he has to leave on his mission. Here's just a quick little throwaway gag in Pokemon, where you have James doing a weird thing with his claw-like hands and moving like a ninja. This is something that I think would be immediately recognizable to a Japanese audience, but a lot of US fans might not necessarily recognize. So this is a reference to Baltan Seijin. Baltan is the main antagonist of many Ultraman series. He's like the Daleks to Doctor Who, and is a space ninja who looks like a crayfish. You'll see Baltan show up in a whole bunch of different anime in just little throwaway appearances. So once you know to recognize this weird lobster man, you'll see him all over the place. Here's a shot that you'll see in a whole bunch of different things where somebody is rising up. Sometimes they're growing as they rise up, and they'll have one fist in front of them. So you can probably guess that this has to do with the transformation sequence. And the main character will be in his human form, and he'll pull out some transformation device, and he'll turn into a giant as he races towards the camera. And this is a shot that throughout the franchise, there's been many, many, many incarnations of Ultraman. And usually they'll have some variation on that transformation. Here's a fun little gag in Golden Kamui. Asurpa's she needs to go to the bathroom in the scene, and her button on her cloak starts blinking red and making a doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo noise. For people who recognize it, that is a reference to the color timer. So when an Ultraman is fighting, he only has a certain amount of time before his power runs out and he has to transform back into a human form. So this light raises the drama by lighting when they are in trouble and their power is running out. And you can tell that her power is running out as she really struggles to avoid going to the bathroom there. Speaking of cute girl characters, we have Chi-Chi from Dragon Ball Z. When she's first introduced, she has this sort of weird head crest that she can throw like a boomerang. And also she fires a beam from a jewel in the middle of her forehead. So this is one that you see getting referenced a fair bit because Dragon Ball is a very popular series, and it's a reference to a very popular series. This is ULTRASEVEN. So his signature attack is throwing the crest on his head, and it cuts up monsters. This is just a fun little gag in Gao Gaigar. There's a monster on the rampage, and this character pulls out something from her coat very dramatically. So this is another ULTRASEVEN reference. That's his transformation device. So he pulls out these glasses and he throws them on his face, and then he transforms into the hero. In Gao Gaigar, that's just her cell phone. She's going to call the police or something. So it's a great gag. Here's a fun little one that usually doesn't get referenced, and that's because this is kind of an obscure show, but it did get a US release. And this is a Wandaba style. So you might look at this title and say, well, what is Wandaba style? Well, when vehicles are launching in these shows, there's a certain type of music that they play, and it goes sort of like Wandaba, and that became known as Wandaba style of music, this sort of launch music for vehicles and mecha shows. Here's kind of an Ultraman reference and kind of not an Ultraman reference. In Ghastly Prince Sanma, they take on three hero forms for a gag, and this is kind of a fun one because they're actually referencing three knockoff characters that are all sort of inspired by Ultraman in Mirror Man, Fireman, and John Borges. So we had the Evangelion religious symbolism panel earlier in this convention, and this is one I just love to bring up over and over again. This is from the Rebuild movies that you get the scene where the atoms are summoned, and this is a fun one because you see those runes that are in each one of the corners, and then the four atoms as they appear briefly. And if you recognize those runes, those are actually the names of the first four Ultra Brothers. We'll talk a little bit more about Evangelion later in the panel. Here's a fun little gag in Kill la Kill. Mako goes on a tirade and is kind of always doing little fun throwaway visual things. And one of the lines she has is or if she's mad that she's not human, and then she looks like this weird white-faced, hunched over thing. This is a reference to one of the original Ultraman episodes with an astronaut who is turned into a monster who is sad that he is no longer human. So this is the monster Jamila. Another popular series a lot of people have seen, but they might not have recognized because it's just kind of a throwaway thing, is in the middle of this group of monsters that get rounded up in One Punch Man, there's a familiar face. And you might know that if you're a fan of Ultra 7, it's his capsule monster, Wyndham. In Nobunagan, this is another series with kind of a lot of kaiju content, and they have a defense team. And the defense team wears these uniforms that sort of look like business attire, but they're bright orange with a red tie. So this is another piece of iconography that should be very quickly recognizable from the original Ultraman series, and that's the Science Patrol. It's this Earth defense team that the main character is a part of, and they all wear these orange uniforms that don't look like they would be very combat efficient, but somehow they work. So here's a little shot in Nurse Witch Kamugi, where the main character goes to confront an adversary in a very scenic little apartment at sunset. This is an iconic shot, and it's a very specific shot because this is from an episode of Ultra 7 called The Targeted Town. It's a great, fantastic episode, beautiful cinematography throughout, and it's iconic, and you will see it referenced in a lot of different things. So if you see this shot with the little table and the mini fridge in the background, and the two characters sort of framed in this fashion, that's what it is referencing there. So we've talked a fair bit here, and this brings us to the question of, Ultraman is getting referenced left and right, but what is it? So Ultraman is an institution in Japan, and I would say that he is the most iconic science fiction character in Japan. It's not Godzilla, it's not Astro Boy, it's Ultraman. You see Ultraman stuff everywhere. Just to give a little sense of how massive this franchise is, it has more episodes than Doctor Who. As far as I can tell from doing some back of the envelope calculations, it seems like it has more individual entries than Gundam and more monsters than Pokemon. Of course, Pokemon keeps the roster of monsters very codified, and in Ultraman, you just kind of have to go through the monster manual and go 1, 2, 3, and it takes a long time. So just as an example of the reach of this franchise, there's a whole shopping district in Tokyo that is themed around Ultraman. There's an annual Ultraman festival. There was a dedicated theme park that is since defunct. The Prime Minister Koizumi actually he played the voice of one of the characters in one of the movies because it's got that sort of level of clout. There were displays for the Olympics, and the Hugo Award when it was in Japan was designed to look like Ultraman. So it's definitely a known quantity with a big footprint. This franchise, we're going to go through a little bit of a history lesson, and it's really the brainchild of this fellow. And if you read that caption, it says Ishiro Honda on the set of 1954's Godzilla, and I see that caption in that photo together all the time. And that is, in fact, Eiji Tsuburaya on the set of 1965's Invasion of Astro Monster. So you really have a Cowboy Bebop at his computer scenario with that caption there. Tsuburaya was considered the god of special effects in Japan in the same way that Osamu Tezuka is the god of manga. So he is very well revered and is kind of considered the ancestor, the mitochondrial Eve, the nucleation point around which the entire industry is formed. He'd been working on the Godzilla franchise for about a decade, and he was getting really good at it. And it occurred to him that, hey, with some tweaks, we could format this to television. So he spun off his own company. And at first, there was a lot of sort of recycling from the stuff that was done in the Godzilla franchise, but a lot of original content as well. And this resulted in Ultra Q. Ultra Q is kind of like the Twilight Zone, but because Tsuburaya was really well known for these giant monsters, he wound up with monsters in almost every episode. And, you know, this is kind of a well-recognized anthology series. You'll see references to it in a lot of places. I think the biggest anime connection is this OVA Twilight Q, which, you know, explicitly references both the Twilight Zone and Ultra Q in the title. But after 28 episodes of Ultra Q, somebody gets the bright idea of, hey, we have monsters every week. What if there is a hero that fought the monsters? This was a good idea. So they sort of they relaunch, and now it's in color, which was a big deal in 1966, and it's a huge smash hit. So you have this 39 episode series of the original Ultraman, considered quite the classic. It's a fantastic series, and you can finally, you know, watch it all in the US right now. It was aired on television here in the 60s and 70s, but for a long time it was kind of unavailable. And now it's subtitled, so that's a plus as opposed to only watching the dub. So some of the tropes that you'll see in Ultraman is that you have the main character, who is this creature made of light from outer space, and he's sort of like a cop, like the Green Lantern, where he keeps the peace in the galaxy, and he comes to Earth and inadvertently kills a human being. And he merges with that human being, and as it so happens, that human being is in a defense force that fights monsters on a weekly basis. So that works out quite well, because then he can transform into this superhero form and fight the monsters when the defense team inevitably can't defeat them. The main character can shoot laser beams, which is a big plus, and he can fly. So these are really iconic parts of the franchise that no entry should be without. A few other things that are a little less essential but are frequently parts of it. There's usually a transformation device, especially nowadays because you can sell toys of those. So it could be a dramatic thing if he loses his transformation device and can't transform to fight the monster. And then there's a time limit where Ultraman can only remain Ultraman for 3 minutes at a time, and it can be a little bit dicey if the monster isn't getting defeated within that 3 minute time span. In later seasons, you see a few more things change in terms of the format. You'll usually see towards the mid-season, there'll be some sort of new weapon or new form or something along those lines that the main character gets. This helps with toy sales, but it's also just a neat dramatic device at times. And then you'll also have, you know, heroes with multiple forms, again, toy sales. And you'll get guest stars, especially when the series has a whole lot of legacy. They'll decide, hey, wouldn't it be great to bring back this character from 5 years ago or 40 years ago? And it's a great thing for the fans. And then for the new fans, they get introduced to the old character, and then they want to go buy the old character stuff. So Ultraman was quickly followed up with a semi-sequel called ULTRASEVEN. And it's a very similar premise. And it's one of the most popular entries in the franchise. This one also aired on US TV, but didn't get dubbed until the 80s. You can see a bunch of clips of it on Space Ghost Coast to Coast, believe it or not. The main contribution of ULTRASEVEN to the anime medium, though, is that Seven doesn't always fight the monsters right away. Sometimes he's held up, and he has to instead use one of his capsule monsters to go rough up the enemy first, because he's captured a handful of monsters in these little capsules, and he just throws them out, calls out their name, they explode into a monster that can fight for some period of time. If this sounds familiar, it is because the creation of Pokemon is explicitly credited ULTRASEVEN as an inspiration there, along with, you know, traditional bug catching. So this combination of Ultra Q, Ultraman, and Ultra 7 leads to this huge renaissance of monster movies and TV in Japan. It's everywhere. And the height of it is 1967, when the 5 biggest Japanese studios all have a movie in theaters, and then there's a bunch of shows on TV as well. From the anime perspective, the ones that are going to be most of interest are the second Cyborg 009 movie, which you can see over here. There's a show called Guzura. Then there's the King Kong show, which was an American co-production. It's actually the first American cartoon animated in Japan. Then we have this this show Yaramon, which is a cute little dinosaur thing, but it's significant because it had a manga adaptation by this fellow who was not very well known at the time. This was only the second thing he ever got published, and his name is Go Nagai, and we'll come back to him in a little bit. So as we were kind of alluding to, there's a whole lot of overlap between anime and manga and this kaiju boom. So just like you see stuff on television, you start to see a whole bunch of manga titles that are kind of aping the format of these giant monster things. My favorite example of this is, in fact, there's a series called the Ultra KAIJU series that is not related to Ultraman at all, but they really want you to think it is, because the author is going by the pen name IPPEI TSUBURAYA. IPPEI being one of the characters in Ultra Q, and Tsuburaya being the creator of the Ultraman brand. But he's just a sort of no-name mangaka. It's not like you saw like the god of manga doing stuff like wait, yeah. Turns out Osamu Tezuka worked on a manga, Magma Taishi, which was promptly done as a tokusatsu show as well. This was kind of rushed on the air to be a direct competitor to Ultraman, and it holds a special title in that it got on the air 1 week before Ultraman did. So it beat it in terms of being the first color science fiction show on TV in Japan. This one, of course, also got an anime release that's not terribly well known, but is kind of fun to watch in its own right. And if you're like, well, this came first, so it's not really it's not really a knockoff. Well, Tezuka did it again, where he made a series called Thunder Mask, which is more explicitly an Ultraman knockoff. Now, Tezuka wasn't the only guy in this game, because Mitsuteru Yokoyama was also involved. And if you saw Mike Toole's panel earlier this weekend, this should be pretty familiar to you, that one of the series that was kind of greenlit to compete with ULTRASEVEN was Giant Robo, or Johnny Sacco and his Flying Robot, which then got sort of retooled as an anime many decades later, and it was phenomenal. That wasn't Yokoyama's only series that kind of was kaiju themed on TV at the time, because Red Shadow was adapted to sort of cash in on the monster craze and also the ninja craze. And Red Shadow got its own anime, and then actually also shows up in Giant Robo the animation, because that's just a crazy cavalcade of all of Yokoyama's characters together. So we're talking a little bit about mangaka who are famous, and one name that's getting a lot of cred in the US right now, thanks to the new fancy releases of The Drifting Classroom, is the master of horror manga, KAZUO UMEZZ'S. And he did an adaptation of the original Ultraman back as it was coming out. And his adaptation is a lot of fun, because it really plays up the horror aspect, because, again, it's KAZUO UMEZZ'S. I really hope that, somebody can license this for a US release, because it's only 2 volumes long, but it is fantastic. So this kind of set the precedent for a lot of major mangaka to get their work to do adaptations of the various Ultra series. So we saw Jiro Kuwata, who you would know from the Batman '66 manga, but also from 8-Man and several other titles. He did a manga adaptation of Ultra 7. And then Getter Robo's Ken Ishikawa did Ultraman Taro. Kazuhiko Shimamoto, who did Blazing Transfer Student and Skullman and designed the anime mascot. He adapted Ultraman Great, which was actually an Australian-produced TV show. Takashi Shina of Ghost Sweeper Mikami and Psychic Squad, he did Ultraman Nexus, and then the original Ultraman was readapted into manga by Yuzo Takada of 3x3 Eyes fame. So there's a lot of like high-profile people that you'll be like, oh man, I know about their work. They're doing Ultraman manga. And speaking of manga, well, I guess we have something else to talk about first. So in the 70s, in 1970, Eiji Tsuburaya passes away, and his company decides that they're going to relaunch Ultraman with a new title called Return of Ultraman. And initially, the idea is that this is going to be about the original Ultraman coming back to Earth, but then they decide, wait, no, we can do this with a new character. And basically, this is a fantastic idea, because when they do it with a new character and kind of add in some continuity drama, they can bring in the previous main characters as guest stars and have crossovers that are fondly remembered and kind of mind-blowing, and audiences dug it a whole lot. They went nuts. And as a result, you kind of see this trend continue with modern franchises, where you can have a show like Yu-Gi-Oh! That runs its course, and then they do a sequel with a different main character, and then you can bring the main character back, and it's fantastic. So, if you see something similar go on in Digimon or Pretty Cure, this is something that Ultraman kind of kicked off in a lot of ways on Japanese TV. So with Return of Ultraman, because it was such a success, you start to see a lot of imitators. You see a bunch of different huge heroes throughout the 1970s that are kind of imitating the style. And this is part of something called the second kaiju boom, and that's sometimes known as the henshin boom, the transformation boom, because one of the characters that was meant to compete with the Tsuburaya was this character, Kamen Rider, that was developed by Toei. Kamen Rider was a huge success, even eclipsing that of Ultraman. And suddenly there was all sorts of competitors all over the place, where everybody was kind of chasing that gold. And you got a whole lot of variation on the theme. So you have all of these transforming heroes on TV, and as a result, you get a bunch of people trying to play with that idea in anime and manga as well. So we mentioned Go Nagai earlier, and in this period of the early 70s, he's involved with stuff at Toei Animation, and he has a couple of really good ideas. One of the things is, well, we have these giant heroes that fight monsters, but what if the hero was just a guy inside of a big mechanical thing, and he's controlling it the way you drive a car, and we get Mazinger, and all of a sudden we have the mecha genre as we know it today. What if the hero was a girl? We get Cutie Honey, and all of a sudden we have the magical girl genre as we know it today. What if the guy that we thought was the bad guy was actually the good guy, and we have Devilman? These are all very much riffing on the formula of Kamen Rider, and they led to huge subsets of what we know of anime as a medium in terms of subgenres. Another hugely influential piece of this boom was Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, which kind of plays around with the idea of what if we had a team of guys and they're all kind of color coordinated, and really sort of a prototype for what became known as the Sentai subgenre. We got sort of codified later on with more tokusatsu stuff, and there were predecessors like Cyborg 009, but Gatchaman was kind of a turning point for sort of establishing the tropes that were known for that. Now, also, there are a whole bunch of live action things that were in production that were not anime, and they were popular. And then decades later, they got adapted into anime, including Kamen Rider, Super Robot Red Baron, Rainbow Man. Godzilla vs. Megalon is arguably an inspiration for the new Godzilla Singular Point anime, Kick Hider and Baron 1. So these are all some anime that have been kind of riffing on these titles of the Henshin boom. But this doesn't last forever. There's an oil shortage in 1975, and these shows get more and more expensive to create, and the audience is waning. But you know what's cheaper than doing special effects is manga. So even though the Ultraman shows on TV sort of peter out after Ultraman Leo in 1974, they can continue in the pages of manga. And this guy, Mamoru Uchiyama, is one of the best known for creating Ultraman manga. And he did the series Battle of the Ultra Brothers. Part of it was released by Viz back in the day. And it sort of tells an ongoing operatic story. And if it looks familiar, it's because this was adapted into a short for the Japan Animator Expo. That was that festival from 2015 that a lot of people only remember for the music video Me, Me, Me. But they did a lot of other good stuff. So this is a fun little story that kind of continues the canon and is then sometimes remembered and sometimes not when the franchise continued after that. Now, Tsuburaya continued to kind of play around with animation as a medium, and they did a couple of shows. One of them was Born Free, and another one was IZENBORG. And these were both interesting combinations of special effects and animation, because anime was getting more and more popular. They did the least intuitive thing in the world, and they decided that they were going to film live-action special effects sequences and combine it with anime for the human characters. You might recognize IZENBORG from a special compilation movie, Attack of the Super Monsters. That's kind of notorious getting played at anime conventions. It's pretty hokey, but it's fun to see this Ritai anime is what they call it. This 3D anime combination where they have humans that are anime, live action special effects pieces. So this naturally progresses to getting a full-on anime Ultraman series. And the Ultraman, which is a terrible name because if you just try to search for the Ultraman, you'll find all sorts of other things. This series is by Sunrise. This series actually is by Sunrise at the same time as Mobile Suit Gundam. This is actually, it premiered the same week as Mobile Suit Gundam. It's a fantastic little show that doesn't get its due, again, because I think a lot of the tokusatsu fandom kind of like looks at it like, ooh, this is animated, we don't want to watch this, and they should, because it's great. In terms of the talent behind it, Shoji Kawamori was a mecha designer. This is kind of before becoming that household name that he is for Macross and Transformers and many other things. But it looks really good in terms of the mecha designs. And then, you know, the directors, one of them had previously done Gatchaman, and then another one was going to later go on to direct Gundam 8th MS Team, which are both very good shows. So that might give you a little bit of an idea of the pedigree. And this one is also a little bit known in the US because it's had a couple of compilation movies, but hopefully it will be more known soon because it's been licensed by Mill Creek Entertainment and will be coming to the US on a complete DVD set in September. So I gotta just talk a little bit about the Ultraman because it's so cool. You know, look, we've got a female ultra heroine, which is something that the series really hadn't played with very much before. The only female character that they'd had to that point was Ultraman's mom, which, you know, that's not so much fun. I love the defense team in this. The main character, the commander, he's got this sweet jacket cape thing that he wears, and I don't know if that's actually part of his uniform or if he's just being stylish. They've got a cute little mascot character as well that's kind of based on the classic Kaiju Pigmon, and then there's all sorts of out there designs that don't quite fully look like what you might get in animation. This was an interesting show to watch because I was really just kind of expecting it to be classic Ultraman, except in animated form. But instead, it is insane because This is coming on the heels of Space Battleship Yamato and Star Wars. So about halfway through, it turns into a full-on space opera with a war with the Ultra home planet, but they're all dressed in togas because that's what you do in War in Space and similar things, I guess. And there's crazy things like this monster that's 938 meters tall, which is much, much bigger than Ultraman, and not something that they would have done in the live action show at that point. So this is quite the hoot to watch. And also, just as an Ultraman, as an anime nerd, I crack up every time they're in their spaceship and they start talking about how they're going to have an attack on Titan, and there's long debates about attack on Titan. And yeah, I hope they get that attack on Titan sorted out and nobody ever debates about attack on Titan in an anime forever again. So one of the creators that gets associated with Ultraman quite a bit, even though he hasn't worked explicitly on the franchise all that much, is this dude, Hideaki Anno. He's a huge figure in the anime space. And it's well known that he sort of started off his career in college doing these short Ultraman fan films. What doesn't always get reported quite right is he didn't end with those fan films. He went on to do a short opening for the science fiction convention, Daikon. So this Daikon Films opening, I think most anime fans know about, and it has some Ultraman references in it. But that's resulted in his company, Daikon Films, starting up. Then he did a follow-up to his original shorts called Return of Ultraman, and that's the one that you can find on YouTube very easily. And it's fantastic because they're lavishly produced special effects for an amateur movie, but Anno himself plays Ultraman just as like himself wearing a jacket instead of a proper costume. And they actually eventually got the license from Tsuburaya to publish that officially. So happy story there. Fast forward to this year, Return of Ultraman was 1983. This year, Anno has a new Ultraman movie coming out, Shin Ultraman, kind of riffing on the success of Shin Godzilla. And it's something I'm much looking forward to. But, in between, Daikon Films was renamed as Gainax, and they did some stuff. One of those things was Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water. The Secret of Blue Water is the main characters related to people from planet M78, which is the planet that Ultraman comes from. But, it's not like, the big project is Evangelion. It's not like there's, references to Ultraman in that. Oh, yeah, there's actually a lot of references to Ultraman and Evangelion. I've got a whole panel referencing pop cultural stuff in Evangelion, and Ultraman's a significant component of it. So you can check that out on YouTube. It would take all day to kind of go through those. Although somebody did mention that I left out that Anno was traumatized as a child by seeing the suit actor's teeth through the Ultraman mask, and that might have inspired some visuals in Evangelion later as well. So the franchise was basically in stasis for most of the 1980s, but every once in a while they had a little thing here or there come out. The most significant was there's this little series called Ultraman Kids, and much like Muppet Babies, it's just the Ultraman characters as children having wacky adventures. This had 26 episodes in 1986 and then 26 more in 1991. 2 movies. The music is by the guy that did the music for Dragon Ball, so it's pretty fun. And this series is also licensed by Mill Creek Entertainment, so we might get a DVD release of Ultraman Kids in the US, and that would be fantastic. I don't know who would buy it besides me, but fingers crossed. Also in the 80s, we got an American attempt by Hanna-Barbera, but for an Hanna-Barbera show, this looks fantastic. It's actually just kind of 4 short episodes stapled together as a movie, but a lot of the big names in American animation, people who would go on to major things, were working on this, including Jeff Siegel of Exo Squad. He actually worked on a compilation movie of the Ultraman before, and he kind of recycled some of the ideas for this. Eric Lewald of X-Men the Animated Series, John Loy of Land Before Time 2, and Kelly Ward of Challenge of the GoBots. Also, Andrea Romano, the voice caster for Batman the Animated Series, and Adrienne Barbeau, who plays Catwoman in that. They are also involved with the English language version. And then on the anime side, we had Studio Sign and Studio Reed. And the creature design was by Keita Amemiya, who would go on to create Zerum and Garo and several other great tokusatsu works that have some crossover with the anime world. Another short anime thing that came out in the sort of slow period was Ultraman Graffiti. It's just kind of hijinks, short bits, but we're running low on time, so I gotta hurry up. One of the creators that was involved with Ultraman starting in the 1990s, he actually worked on the Australian series first, but then went on to write Ultraman Tiga and Ultraman Gaia, as well as a handful of other things, was Chiaki Konaka. He's a big name because shortly after doing his Ultraman stuff, he takes off in anime with the series Serial Experiments Lane, and he worked on, The Big O and Digimon Tamers and a bunch of other stuff. His calling card is the Lovecraft mythos. He's a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft's work, so you get Cthulhu mythos references, and he names a whole bunch of characters after those. A whole bunch of other people that are kind of crossing over. I think the big ones, Kenji Kawai has done a whole bunch of anime music from Mob Psycho and Ghost in the Shell and Ranma, and Ichiro Itano, known for the Itano Circus. There's several Itano circuses that were animated by Ichiro Itano in some of the Ultraman shows, so be on the lookout for those. All right, we should talk about Gridman the Hyper Agent, because this was kind of the first attempt to bring Ultraman back to live action in the 90s, and it was a dry run, kind of to relaunch the Ultraman franchise without really relaunching the Ultraman franchise, but it was a good thing in its own right, and it was fondly remembered. And part of that same Japan Animator Expo that we had mentioned previously, there was a sequel film that was made by Studio Trigger, and that was very well received. So what happened was that got expanded into a full sequel TV series. Sequel might be a spoiler, but you can kind of figure it out. This show is fantastic, highly recommended, and it's not just for the thighs. There's actually other things that are going on in this that are quite good. There's a reason why it's a Seiun Award winner. So I would highly recommend basically anybody check out Gridman. This is, it's got the 4 S's. There was a discussion earlier about if this should be pronounced or not. Officially, it's like Holic, where it has the 3 X's in front. It's just a silent 4 S's for whatever reason. So in Gridman, there's all sorts of Ultraman references. Hey, you remember this shot from earlier with the ULTRASEVEN confession thing? Yeah, that's in there. And these references are sometimes actually plot relevant. So a couple of examples here, little things like you have a character who's a big Ultraman fan, and she's playing with 2 monsters toys. And both of those are monsters from episodes of Ultraman where it turns out everything was a dream. That might be relevant to the episode you're watching. There's also one episode where characters misidentify an alien monster as something that it's not, and that's not going to be immediately understood unless you know what alien monster this is and what alien monster they're calling it. Another thing that's kind of a little death flag is this character here has a plushie, and people would recognize that from Ultraman Nexus. The character has a similar plush in Ultraman Nexus and promptly promptly dies, so you might know that this character is not long for this world. Ultraman Nexus is definitely one of the ones that you'll see a lot of similar iconography between Gridman and that show. And, you know, you kind of wonder if the writer of Nexus was aware. And yeah, it turns out he was aware because it was the same dude. So Keiichi Hasegawa has worked on a number of Ultraman shows, but also in the anime world a fair bit. He worked on the fantastic reboot of Astro Boy in 2003, as well as the 2007 Gegege no Kitaro and Rage of Bahamut Genesis, which was you know, pretty good Mappa show that unfortunately came out the same season as the first Garo anime, so it kind of split the audience there. There's a follow-up to Gridman called DYNAZENON, which is kind of playing on the big robot from the tokusatsu show. That is just ended, but it's getting an English language dub. There's not quite as many Ultraman references in that, but it's still a good watch, so would recommend checking that out. This brings us to Ultraman Tiga in 1996. This was the real relaunch of Ultraman in Japan after being off the air for 16 years. This series is very well remembered, and now it's the 25th anniversary, so you'll see a big push of Tiga stuff. And this also just got announced for a new DVD release because the old Funimation DVD release is long out of print. This is one that's known in the US because of its dub by 4Kids Entertainment. And if you know about dubs from 4Kids Entertainment, you might know that you will be cringing when you watch this one. They didn't really know what to do with the show. They kind of gave it a parody dub, and it doesn't really work. Also, they got rid of the sweet opening theme by Dave Rogers, who's done a bunch of like Initial D music and, you know, a cover of Get Wild from City Hunter, which is the best song in anime. So around the time of Tiga coming out, you start to see all sorts of anime shorts. We'll kind of gloss over some of these. You had an office comedy called Ultraman Kids, an OVA called Super Fighter Legend, which was kind of playing on Kinnikuman figures and Saint Seiya with the armor that the characters don. Ultra Nyan, which I love because it's a two-movie thing where the Ultraman is a cat. I love it. M78 Love and Peace. It's a series of cute little vignettes with the various characters, and it was attached to the Ultraman Gaia movie. So going forward, eventually the Tsuburaya company is bought out by a larger Japanese conglomeration, and they're kind of trying to shift focus and rebrand things. And one of the ideas that they have to kind of retool things is they start a card game. And to capitalize on that card game, they come up with a cable show called Ultra Galaxy Mega Monster Battle. That's quite the mouthful. This actually just got a Blu-ray release in the States, so go check it out. But what I think is kind of fun about the way that this works is this is not really an Ultraman show. This is a show about characters who have monsters in their little capsules, very Pokemon style, and then they send the monsters out to battle one another. And it's just this big loop of tokusatsu influencing anime, influencing tokusatsu. Even the main monster is Gomora, who is, you know, a big monster from the original in that he's the first monster that has a two-part arc. And he kind of inspired Greymon from Digimon, so it makes sense that then he becomes the protagonist monster in Mega Monster Battle, where he then is basically working like Greymon, including the ability to like level up. So this card game series isn't only done as this live action thing. It was also done as a CG anime, where they had several episodes where these alien monsters who were villains in the original series are all the heroes now, but they are hunting these bigger monsters that are just the rampaging, not aliens, not intelligent monsters. These shorts are actually a lot of fun. They're very dynamic, and the designs are just really stylish in terms of the way that they re-envision the various aliens in the franchise. There is also a series of shorts called Kaiju Sakaba Kanpai. And this is almost an advertisement for a real world location. There is a bar, there's actually 2 bars in Japan where you can go and the staff are all dressed up like various ultra monsters. So the idea is that they don't let heroes in, it's all staffed by villains, and you go and you see the monsters and the waiters kind of have their own monster themed things, and the food is all monster themed, and it's a fantastic place. Would recommend going if you're ever in Japan. Yeah, they did a series of short anime kind of playing it up, and it's a delight. Now, we know we like cute things and magical girls, so there's another series of shorts. This one is actually on Crunchyroll. This is Kaiju Girls. So the idea in this series is much like Ikitosen, that all these monsters existed at some point in the past, and now girls have awoken in the current day, and they have the reincarnation of these monsters and the ability to transform into kind of monsterish magical girl forms. For the most part, this is done in a very sort of chibi SD style. From what I understand, it was mostly done by a single person in his spare time. So it was kind of impressive that he was able to get out, a 3-minute episode every week. But these are an unusual aspect of the franchise. This was followed up with a theatrical film that's much better animated, and this focuses on some of the terrible villain monsters from Ultraman Leo that are responsible for slaughtering a large number of people. So it's really it's weird what they get moe-fied, but whatever. This one isn't on Crunchyroll, but it's on HIDEAKI. So if you want to see the whole thing, you kind of have to have subscriptions to both. This brings us to one of the more popular entries in the anime side of the Ultraman franchise, and this is just called Ultraman. It's usually rendered in all caps. That's how you can tell it apart from the original series. And this is based on a manga that's available from Viz in the States that kind of re-envisions the Ultraman franchise as human-sized characters. The idea is the original Ultraman happened, and then this is all about his son, who inherited some ultra powers but doesn't really grow large, and instead wears this suit of armor to go fight aliens who live on Earth. This has got a adaptation on Netflix from Production IG and Sola Digital Arts, which means it's all very CG, but it was really well received. It was the top-rated anime on Netflix in 2019, and they have since announced a second season. There's enough source material in the manga to easily do a second season, but we don't know when that second season is happening, so who knows? I get into a lot of debates about this series with people because I don't think it looks good, and a lot of people say it does look good, and I kind of figured out that a lot of people are just watching the fight scenes, and the fight scenes, when it's just the mecha suits and the monsters, they actually don't look too bad. But with Sola, when you're dealing with human characters, they kind of look plastically and unemotional and kind of like dangly doll things. And I think you can tell just by looking at this still that this doesn't look like very expressive animation. But the fight sequences, all of the shiny metal and laser beams and stuff, yeah, those are decent. So I would recommend checking out the manga first. Maybe watch the anime if you're feeling like it. Another series that's currently being serialized on YouTube, it's already at 52 episodes, is Kaiju Step Wanda Baba. There's a gag. A lot of people say Ultraman is for babies. This literally is for babies. This is for very, very young, possibly pre-verbal children. And it's just cute monsters having cute adventures, and they're short and they'll distract your child for some period of time. I don't know if you necessarily have to watch it otherwise. Then a few things that have been announced but haven't actually materialized yet. In 2019, there was a co-production with Toei called KAIJU Decode that was announced. We haven't heard anything since. There's a new movie being made for Netflix. This is Western animation. It's from some of the folks that did Kubo and the Two Strings, but it's not stop motion animation. It's going to be CG animated. This was just announced in May, so I'm sure we'll see more details from it coming up in the future. We got a couple of bootleg projects, and this is due to a rights dispute between a company in Thailand, which claimed it had the rights to Ultraman when they didn't. And they licensed it out to a couple of different anime studios. Not actually in Japan, because that would be stupid, but abroad people don't always know better. So there's one called Ultraman the Animation, which apparently got 26 episodes produced, but there's not very much of it you can find online. And then 3 movies made in China very recently, actually, called they were a tie-in to this TV series Dragon Force, and they brought in Ultraman as a guest star for these movies, and it's just real unfortunate. I feel bad for them because they produced these movies that honestly don't look too bad, even if they're kind of like plagiarizing some stuff, and now they kind of are going to have a hard time distributing them. Like any big franchise, you'll find a whole lot of crossovers with various things. Video games are an obvious tie-in. You'll find a lot of games where like Ultraman and Godzilla and Kamen Rider and Gundam all get together and play sports. But you'll also find things like Gridman is in the new Super Robot Wars, and there's a game called The City Shrouded in Shadow that has Pat Labor and Evangelion together with Ultraman characters. And you'll find all sorts of other little cross-promotion things. Like here's one for Ozumatsu-san, which I thought was really fun because that's about 6 brothers, and the main Ultras are all known as the Ultra Brothers. There's 6 of them. There was a Malaysian TV series called Upin and Ipin, I think. I don't know that language, so I can't speak to it too much, but they had a couple of movies featuring Ultraman. And then Ultraman has also showed up several times in Woozer and in the Kamen Rider Den-O chibi anime featuring the Imagine. If you want to look into some of the stuff that is available to read, there's a bunch of comics that are available in the US and then a couple of manga. The secret best manga is actually the Ultra KAIJU Humanization Project. This is the most anime thing because this is an isekai about after the monsters get killed, they are reincarnated as Japanese high school students. Yeah, this is it's actually it's a blast. It's got a lot of very funny references that are specific to parodying individual scenes from the live action shows. Unfortunately, it didn't go past volume 4 in the US, and that was it came out right before the series started getting released here, and it's really quite the shame. But yeah, it's that one's a blast. Also, the Ultraman that's released by Viz, Battle of the Ultra Brothers, is long out of print, but you might be able to find that. If you can read Japanese, there's a whole lot more manga out there, but you're going to have to understand it. So I'm right at the hour. I went at super speed. I'm sorry if I was ignoring the chat a little bit, but that's kind of the way things go. But I've got a blog on WordPress, Mazer Patrol. Most of the updates nowadays are on the Facebook page for Mazer Patrol. And then I show up at conventions sometimes and talk about stuff or so on and so forth. So,
well, thank you so much. I mean, there's nothing after you. If you want to take 5 minutes to do questions, you're more than welcome to.
Absolutely, that would be fun. Yeah. Again, sorry for not following the chat too closely. I kind of looked at it every once in a while. But any questions here?
Give them a moment to catch up. A lot of people saying thank you. They really liked the panel. Fantastic panel. Thank you. That was awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the panel. My mother also enjoyed it. Nice. Here we go. Why is Ultraman always romantically paired up with that one black and white alien in the Christmas commercials?
Oh, Dada? I'm not sure. I don't know if I've seen those commercials specifically, or if I have, maybe I blocked them out. Dada is kind of an interesting looking alien, but I don't know of any reason why they would be teamed up unless it's a different alien.
Somebody asking if they're going to watch live action Ultraman, is there a good place to start? That's probably a tough question to answer.
Yeah, that depends on your taste. For a good sampling across the franchise, if you can stomach stuff from the 60s, the original is a good way to go. If you want something a little bit more modern, Ultraman Max is fantastic because they brought in a bunch of talented people like Shusuke Kaneko, who directed the Death Note movies, Takashi Miike, who directed like 100 movies, so I won't even try to name them all. Akio Jisoji is one of the iconic directors for the Ultra franchise and did some work on that. So Ultraman Max, once it's available. If you want something super modern, Ultraman X is available here now and easy to stream.
Oh, Mike Dent is in the chat. I'm sorry, Mike, that I put an event at the same time as your event. I didn't know. Let's see.
I'll talk to Mike later.
Waiting to see if there's anything else. Mostly it's just people thanking you for the panel. I don't know if you have the chat open in front of you, but
yeah,
just a lot of comments saying thank you and that they really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in.
Wait a little bit longer and then we could wrap this up if we don't get any more questions. Sorry, I've lost the energy, everybody. I'm crashing after doing 3 days of this. I'm out of energy.
Yeah, that was a Herculean effort. So everybody give a round of applause for Jump Hall. So
you're not the first person to use that specific word. Here we go. Are those Ultra Galaxy fight shows on the? Oh boy.
Okay. Yeah. The Ultra Galaxy Fight is a new series, but it's being uploaded simultaneously in Japanese and in English. The funny thing is, if you watch it in Japanese, there aren't subtitles, at least last time I checked, but you can just watch the English dub. So that's kind of a little bit weird, but hey, it's on YouTube and it's free. So it is one of those things that it's funny to me that they're doing the series with an English dub that is really kind of for dyed-in-the-wool fans because there's a lot of like callbacks to previous shows that people might not have seen.
Well, I think that does it. I think we've given enough time for people to formulate questions. I really appreciate you doing this. Thank you for being the, I guess, end cap of the convention. It's I know that's a hard spot to take, and just as many people showed up for your panel as pretty much everything else. So I'd say that's something to be proud of.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a blast. Hope some people are educated.
Well,
and again, feel free anyone to seek out my blog or whatever on Facebook. It's easy enough, and I'm pretty responsive to questions.
You may have also mentioned this. Again, apologies, I'm starting to fade. You wrote a book, right? Did you promote that?
Yeah, I wrote a book. It's called Kaiju for Hipsters. It's 101 giant monster movies outside of the usual Godzilla, Gamera, Mothra, King Kong, the ones that everybody knows. These kind of go a little bit more off the beaten track. I also wrote some of the liner notes for the upcoming Daimajin Blu-ray release from Arrow Video. So check that out if you're looking for some good kaiju content.
Awesome. Well, thank you once again. I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Likewise.
Cheers.
Later.